The next piece of equipment we're going to discuss, it's called a Colson dolly. Most of the people in the moving industry don't refer to it as that. They'll generally be in two colors. This one being blue is referred to as Big Blue. We have another version which comes in red, and I'm guessing you can figure out what we call that one. Very similar in design to the appliance dolly. It's got a couple of different itty-bitty features on it. It shares the same lip design. It will have the rubber padding on the front, just like the appliance dolly. This one has a double strap system as compared to the single strap system that we had on the appliance dolly. It's got the same stair runners down at the bottom, suffering from the same faults on what they can do, marking up a white solid surface. And their ratchet design is a little bit different than what you might be used to. Let's go ahead and show you with a fireproof file on how we might be moving this. Greg, could you come over here for a second and give me a hand tilting this thing over? It's awful heavy. Okay, we're going to slide that under. Then we're going to take our strap and we're going to go around. And watch what we're doing here. This can be easily, we loop it through. There's a little hook up here. There's a little hook right here on the handle. We pull it good and tight. And then we're going to go ahead and crank it. That's going to dig into it. We're going to secure our slack. As I'm going to have two men moving this, I'm not going to, but I could, if needed, use an additional strap on this. And you might want to if you're going to be going up or down any stairs. This demonstration is going to be on flat ground. And I'd like to show you one last little trick that this dolly does. And like the Big Red, there is a handle on the right-hand side. These are both designed for right-handed people. You simply pull this, and that should release our axle so that when we break this back, you'll see that it tilts or tripods. Now, generally speaking, with the Big Red design, when the wheel comes back, you have to listen for the click. What happens is a carriage folds out and a bar drops down. It's different from this design. This one automatically releases and comes back. This will not fold back up. The Big Red design can, and that's why this is probably the preferred model to use out in the business. That's one of the rules I have. You got to make sure you listen to it click. Another one is, generally speaking, this is a fireproof file cabinet, and we understand what our weight is with it. But when we're moving a gun safe, which is the traditional piece of furniture that you'll be moving with a Big Blue on a household, you may be moving fireproof files with this on an office move. You never leave this dolly unattended in this kickback position. This thing, this piece that we're moving, we've got a pretty good idea of where its weight is, but we don't necessarily know where all the weight is on a gun safe. And when we start moving larger, taller power cabinets, and this is one of the things we move in there, they can be anywhere from 7 to 8 feet tall, and you'll never know where the weight is. If you're going to walk away from this, you're going to have to, Greg, would you give me a hand again? You're going to have to bring this thing up and leave it set like so. Unusual piece of equipment to use. You may not use one for a couple of years in this industry, and you may turn around and use it for 3 weeks straight after that. Again, just keeping in mind it should never be left alone in the tilt back position, and that you should make sure that your wheels are locked into place. The next piece of equipment we're going to talk about has many names. This is called by some a J bar or a Johnny bar or a Johnson bar, or for those guys that have been around probably as long as me or a little bit longer, it's got a nickname called the Swede. And what it basically is, it's a big pry bar on an axle with wheels. And what you use the J bar or the Johnny bar for is to simply pry something up, usually high enough to get a block underneath it. Sometimes we'll do it just for a piece of equipment if you're quick enough, but generally speaking, we're going to do a block first before we get our four-wheeler underneath it. This will not pry it up high enough. I'm going to show you how to use a hand truck to finish that. I have Mr. Pearson here with me. When I lift this up, he's going to slide a 2x4 under there, making careful that he's gripping it from the side and the top and not with his fingers underneath it. Never trust a piece you are jacking up in the air with any type of a prying situation, because we can have a failure in the bottom. This entire lip could go through. You always anticipate that this piece is going to come down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here from the side, and I'm going to lay 250 sweet ones into it. Greg's going to slide that under there for me. We're going to land that right there on it. See how easy that was? Going to take this over to the side, out of the way. Now we're going to take a common steel-wheeled, solid-wheeled hand truck, and we're just going to come up right up under the support brace on it. And we are going to very gently and under control raise it. Greg sets the dolly, keeping his hands underneath. Ready? Coming down. Exciting. Nope, we didn't get it in deep enough. Okay, is it still on the in there? Another thing you can always do, which will also give you a little more bite, is you take it from an angle. Can you tilt it and come in from the side one board deeper? Now pull it all the way out. All the way out. There you go. Okay? Now roll it forward a little bit so that board, there you go, so the board doesn't land on it. Okay? Now we're ready to take it. We're going to go ahead and take this piece off now, just to show you how we would remove it when we got into position. Greg, do me a favor. Come over here and grab this piece of wood. I don't want this to hit it. Now this is going to get kind of heavy when I come up. You know what? I'm going to tilt that, pull that out. The next piece we're going to talk about, these are called roll-a-lifts, also referred to sometimes as safe jacks. They work in a pair, in a tandem. You'll see they have sliding forks on the bottom that are adjustable. What we do with this is we're going to get it underneath on each opposing side. And we're cheating a little bit. Most of the time we'd have to use a J-bar to pry this thing up one corner at a time and get a block underneath it, but I didn't have anything built onto the ground for this lesson. This will still work. It's the same method other than having to jack it up the same way we did the big piano in the back. So what we're going to start with is we're going to bring them right up inside it. And then I'm going to connect my logistic strap, which you'll learn more about in the loading module right down here at the bottom. I'm going to run mine over here to Greg. Hook that up for him. And we're going to tighten that up. Good and snug. Tie a knot in the back side of it. Just a regular old slip knot with a granny. So that we're not going to have it catch on anything. we go. Now on the mechanism here, there's a little relief valve. You got to make sure that it's closed all the way before you try and jack it up. We have a handle welded in here. Just going to take this over, make sure it's turned caddy quarter as far as it'll go. And I'm guessing that's it. Now we're going to take a 2x4, pull this back just a little, put the 2x4 right up against it. You in there, Greg? And we're going to go ahead and start jacking this thing up. And up I come. Always monitor the position of your board. You want to keep that there so this thing doesn't hit metal into it. I'm up in the air, and you're up in the air. Now, generally speaking, these things will pick up about 7,000 to 8,000 pounds. You want to make sure you keep your fingers and toes away from all of this, and try not to raise it up any higher than you need to. As long as you have clearance, you're going to take a look at the path you're going to go, if there's going to be any humps or thresholds. This would probably lift it probably another 3 to 4 inches off the ground if need be, but I don't think we need to. And once we have this thing on wheels, 2 men can move 5,000 to 7,000 pounds quite easily. Common piece of equipment for the O&I moves. This is called a machine cart. It's also referred to by some of your older movers in the business, particularly those from the eastern part of the country, as a gondola. I always try and teach both names. There's nothing funnier than watching a helper that's new to the business pulling one of these around, asking where the gondola is. You'll see that it has 3 shelves, goes all the way from the front to the rear. This top shelf here being very narrow, we don't traditionally put any unstable items. Not all of them have this design. We have another one behind here we're going to show you in a minute. It's got a much higher lip. We don't normally put monitors up here. It's called a machine cart for a reason. We're obviously going to put a lot of machinery in here. We're going to use small printers. We're going to put computer items in there nowadays. But basically anything goes. I've put trash cans in here. We put boxes in here in the past. But its first primary goal is to eliminate all the electronics that are loose that are going out on the move. Now, before we load any of these pieces of electronics in here, we've got to make sure they're all tagged. We want a location or an idea where all of this is going. Another thing to remember that some companies may ask you to do, and I'm just going to pull this back here for a minute. Most companies are going to ship just the way that is with the units in it. Some of them will actually want you to lay a pad up and down, and then you would go ahead and you would do this on each shelf, but you would go ahead and load your top part of the units, and then you would flip your pad back over it. Just to give you a heads up on that. Not all of them will do it. It can make the move a little tougher to do because you're not going to be able to read where the tags are, where this cart goes until you strip it. And another thing you want to remember with this cart, it never leaves the building until it's been shrink wrapped. And Greg and I are going to show you a little bit about how to shrink wrap one of these without getting violently ill or without messing up the wheels. Now, we got our good friendly shrink wrap here. And one of the things that I see movers do that drives me nuts is that when they want to start, they'll squeeze some of this together, about 2 feet of it, and they'll make a rope of it, and they'll tie it around a wheel. Now this is going to bind up in the wheel, and it's going to make it difficult to roll it in a straight line, and that's kind of tough to do. When you think about the amount of electronics that could end up in one of these machines, you could be looking with computer office software at about 30 grand worth. And the last thing I want is a defective wheel on this machine because somebody's tied too much plastic around it to make it easier to start. It's very easy to start a roll of shrink wrap on this. You generally want to have somebody holding it for you, but all you're really going to do is hook it. Gosh, how tough was that? Here, let me do that again in slow motion. Okay, don't put it around the wheel. And then we're simply going to hold it while one person goes around and wraps. On a good solid floor like this, with a tighter roll of shrink wrap, this cart would be chasing Greg around. And you don't have to overdo it. Generally speaking, we're just going to put a 14-inch, barely overlayer it. We want to go all the way down to the bottom. Now, I'm going to put Greg on the other side. And what we're going to do is a little bit more protection. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn this to you. This is what a good sized belly will do for you. We're going to pull it a little bit, and we're just going to put it right up against our belly and make it stick. I'm going to hand that over to Greg. Greg's going to pull his over and stick it with his belly. Well, he doesn't do the belly. I bring it back. Now, I pretty much got the top of that covered. I twist. One time around, it's ready to go. Now, if this was a wet weather day, if we were moving this stuff in the rain, we'd cover the entire front. But right now we have enough pressure on that shouldn't go anywhere. Another O&I, office and industrial piece of equipment, not quite as common as the machine cart. This is called a library cart. This one has uno, dos, tres, cuatro. We have 4 shelves, but they only go halfway into the cart because we turn it around and you got 4 more on the other side. All of these are at a slight angle. It's called a library cart for a reason. We use it to move books, papers, but we also use it on an office move to maybe move office supplies. Or any other small particle. If we have small cartons involved, we'll fill this up and it balances out much better than the machine cart. Traditionally, you're not going to have that many of these on a job as opposed to the machine cart. One of the things to remember about both of these carts that we said before, with the machine cart, it can get very valuable with the electronics we're loading it in. This library cart gets very heavy. And again, if it has a bad wheel and if you're not easily able to push it and control it, get help, get somebody else, what we talked about in the beginning of the class for the orientation of that. You dump one of these with 8 billion paper clips and pens and rubber bands and tacks and all the other goodies that any office supply room might have. You can shut down a hallway and a move for probably about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And that's not going to be good in any case. Now also, unlike the machine cart on this, very rarely will you see anything tagged on the inside of the cart. This one may have that office moving tag that we showed you before, simply placed on the end, giving you a location of what's in it. On a library move, we have specific lettering and numbers that we follow these in a system with, and we will cover that in another lesson on another day. And that's about it for this. Like I say, you'll have probably 10% of your carts will be a library style cart as opposed to the machine cart. Next on the list, panel carts. This is a design, a common design that you'll see. It's an older design. It's got some advantages to it because its sides lift out, its center lifts out. It can become used as a large platform type of dolly. This solid steel design is often what you're going to find. It's much more common in the industry right now. It's got a shorter base and it's easier to turn. And what we use panel carts for are flat items. Now, obviously, as the name implies, panels will go in it. And when we put a panel in here, you want to put it in gently. It's very easy to damage the sides of these panels where they mount together. You also want to make sure that if you have any glass in here, that we have a pad in between this. Oftentimes we will shrink wrap this when it goes out of the building to move. But one of the things I want you to remember also, as we start loading these carts, if it's not panels, everything else that goes in here is tagged. We'll take desk pads out from underneath the desk, and they've got to be tagged. We'll take folding tables in here, they've got to be tagged. We'll take blackboards, whiteboards, ink boards, marker boards, they all got to be tagged. This is what we use to move a conference tabletop and a really big one, not just this little work surface here, but we'll take a 12 or 14 foot long conference tabletop and put it in sideways. But guess what? It's got to be tagged. Again, you will live or die on an office move by your people putting the correctly tagged items into the equipment. Very simple piece of equipment. We'll often transport masonite with this. Masonite is a floor protection we use for office moves traditionally. Again, this design here is not very popular in the industry. This one is more or less what you're going to be working with. And just remember that everything we put in there other than panels are going to be tagged. Next piece on the list goes by many names, brand names. It's a plastic stackable crate. This brand name in particular is called E-Crate. There's a Tyga box out there, there's a Rent-A-Crate out there, and probably another half dozen other. They're a plastic sealed crate, commonly used on office moves. This replaces the O&I cartons that we've done in the past. And one of the topics I wanted to bring up while we're on the subject, this is point number 5 that we listed in the O&I lesson, was nothing gets moved without a tag. Now you can barely see it because we've got a green crate, but this is what an O&I tag looks like. And it's going to have a floor number, room number, and a piece number on it listed. And none of that's going to make any sense because that ain't what they're going to write on it. Whenever you look on one of these, it's generally going to have someone's name and their room number or their cubicle number. For instance, all of these might say Peter 319. And this is going to a guy named Peter, and he's in cubicle or office number 319. These crates sit on their own dolly. Very easy to move, kind of a pleasure to work with the industry heading in the direction. But one thing you got to make sure before you move any of these things is the tag, the tag, the tag, the tag. And in real life, they would have a location written on them. One of the tricks you need to learn in an office move situation is how we stack cartons. Some companies will do it with a simple 5 stack, going 2 and 2. With one across the top. Simple way to do it, safe way to do it, but you're only getting 5 at a pop. Some other companies have now decided out here, and some of them will do different tricks with box platforms, to where we take our first one and we put it in wide ways across the dolly, and then we take the next one, we put it long ways, and then we simply reverse the process and put it long ways. Oh, by the way, they all got to be tagged before they go on the dolly. Oh! You see how they interlock this way? And then last one goes on top, dead center. 7, all on a stack. That's called an A stack. This piece of equipment we're going to discuss right now, this is called a stair climber. Not going to use it very often. This is a exceptionally heavy piece, a heavy-duty moving piece. We're going to be using a fireproof file cabinet on this. This is a mandatory 2-man piece of equipment. You never want to have one person only operating this. It looks quite similar in its design to a appliance dolly. but it has one different feature on it. It's got a little motor here with some teeth that we're going to show you. They actually come out and they're operated by a toggle switch. In this case, moving it outside will help lift the dolly up the stairs, and for coming down, you simply move the toggle switch to the inside. Now, it's got a different type of strap off. This one has a safety belt type design, and we're just going to go around our piece here. Now that you got it latched, now you're going to want to make sure that it's good and tight. You can do that by pulling back on our strap over here. We're going to activate our lock here. It's usually on this tier just above the motor. Push it down, good and tight. My helper here is going to help me break this over. Remember, just keeping balance on this, the machine's going to do all the work. You know what? Okay, lay it down. Machine does all the work. All you really have to do at this point is keep the balance. We're going to go down the stairs with this piece now. Again, it's the same idea. We're going to let the machine do all the work. It's just going to lay over for us and lower the piece down. All we're doing is keeping the balance. Making sure you always have the feet away from it. Keep the back of the dolly right up against the stair. Just let the piece do the work. And down we go.